Over the course of World War II, there was a lot of accounts from ordinary people who were caught in the middle of this devastating and world-altering conflict. From distraught families writing to their sons in the military, to German officers and soldiers questioning the reason for the war and what's in it for them when it's over. Today we're going to discuss the story behind each of the letters that appears in the Sniper Elite series. And more specifically, this video is dedicated to going over the letters and telling the story behind them in Sniper Elite 3 for this video. The other two will come in different videos of their own. More specifically, this video itself is dedicated to Sniper Elite 3's collectible letters. So let's get right into it. On the first mission of Sniper Elite 3, once we exit the trenches and make our way up the hill, we can find a dead British soldier with a letter in his hand which reads this: "Dear Martin, even here we have heard of the Tiger tank. But everything has a weakness, son. I'm sure you boys will find it. In the meantime, write to your mother a little more often. You know how she worries. Your proud dad." As I have just read, this first letter gives us insight into what the civilian population back in Britain are likely talking about, like rumors and whatever news makes it back to the home island. They probably ask themselves, what kind of monstrosity does the enemy have now? But in keeping with the spirit of the British people that was shown from famous photographs of the war, such as the bombings of London, or even the evacuation of Dunkirk, the attitude of the British people in World War II is famously an attitude of confidence, as shown by this father, showing little concern that this new tank will actually be an unstoppable machine or any kind of a threat, casually stating that he is sure that a weakness will be found, and then pivoting to asking his son to write back home more often, so that his mother will not worry so much. And of course, the last line tells us the father's attitude of his son serving in the British Army, an attitude of pride in his son for doing his duty. Little does this family know that this will be the last letter that their son will get from them. This letter also puts a name to the soldier who held the letter in his hand: Martin. This letter being the only kind of letter in this first mission that has any sort of relation to the story, we are going to make our way now to Mission 2. In Mission 2, once you spawn in, there is an officer we can kill in one of the nearby tents, and once we kill this officer, we can find a letter on him that reads this: General Major Coke. As per your orders, I have attached a map of officer assignments in Gaborone. I hope this is of use to you and General Volin. Captain Salvatore. This letter gives us a hint into the hierarchy of the Germans and Italians stationed in Africa and how they work together. The Germans, of course, having the more dominant presence out of the two Axis powers. This letter is also responsible for giving the positions of other officers in the area to Karl as part of his investigation into the doings of the general named in this letter, a general named Volin. Along the main path, sitting in a tent on the right side, another letter can be found, which reads this: The retaking of Tobruk was a grand victory for the Reich. Field Marshal Rommel is a great soldier for whom I have the utmost respect. But now the Führer has sent General Volin to oversee the campaign. I do not know what to think of him. He is no soldier, that much is certain, and he exhibits a zeal that makes me uneasy. In this personal account of an unknown soldier, he talks about how the Axis managed to retake the port of Tobruk, which is what happened in the first mission. He paints it as a grand victory for the German Reich and praises Field Marshal Rommel for the victory, saying that he is a true soldier and that he respects him greatly, while also talking about the news that General Volin was sent by Hitler to oversee the campaign, replacing Rommel. This soldier doesn't know what to make of Volin, but clearly states that he isn't a soldier like Rommel is, and stating that Volin makes him feel uneasy, highlighting that the two leaders have different styles of leadership and ways of doing things. Across from this tent is another tent on the left side of the path with a deceased German soldier in a chair and another deceased German soldier on the ground, with what appears to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound in the one sitting in the chair. Next to him is a note sitting on the table, which reads this: General Volin demands complete obedience on pain of death. To that end, he has ordered the immediate dismissal of Lieutenant Wolf on the grounds of negative attitude. Failure to comply means my own dismissal, and worse, the death of my family. I would risk my own life, but not theirs. When Wolf gets here, I shall do my duty, but I will not be responsible for murdering any more of my men. So this is the last account of this German soldier, or what we can assume to even be an officer. We know that he had command over others, so maybe he was a captain or something more. This man says that he was instructed to dismiss a lieutenant by the name of Wolf on the grounds of negative attitude, and judging by the second body that we find on the ground, this is probably that Lieutenant Wolf mentioned in the letter. Negative attitude, we can most likely guess, is non-compliance to General Volin's orders, or it could even be questioning General Volin's orders. Either way, Volin sends an order to dismiss Lieutenant Wolf, and this captain, or whatever he is in charge of the dismissal and says he will do his duty, because if he doesn't, he himself will most likely be dismissed, and even worse, he fears that if he does not carry out the order, that General Valen will bring harm to his family back in Germany. He also says that he will do his duty, but afterwards, he says he will not be responsible for the murder of any more of his men. Of course, the word dismissal refers to the murder of soldiers that do not comply with Valen's orders. And so, this unknown officer sits in his chair, having done his duty, but with no real guarantee that Valen won't go through with punishing his family for him taking the easy way out. After leaving this tent, we can find the next letter on another officer that we kill positioned closer to the lake. The letter reads, "I'm glad Valen's lackey is out bothering other outposts. Every time I see him, we lose more men in the name of stupid orders from Berlin." In this account, the officer is expressing contempt for someone who answers to General Valen, calling whoever this person is, Valen's lackey. He explains that every time the lackey is in the area, more men end up being lost in the name of stupid orders from Berlin, which means either the German High Command keeps sending orders for execution, or, more likely, Valen and his men will use that reason as an excuse to do away with the people that won't go along with what they're doing. And it's also not isolated to this outpost, but others as well. Given the fact that Valen was put in charge of the entire campaign in North Africa, we can bet that a lot more men have died for no good reason where the Germans are concerned. Further down the path, there is a building we can reach that has a document sitting on some cargo crates, which reads, "This General Valen's presence unsettles me. He has the air of a man who is used to getting what he wants. Damn the consequences. There is no doubt he is determined to go far, but at what cost to the rest of us?" Here we have another account from an unknown soldier that expresses that the mere presence of General Valen makes him feel unsettled, and just from his demeanor can tell that Valen is used to getting what he wants, no matter what. The next document can be found in one of the yellow tents, which reads this. "I received a welcome letter from Berlin this morning. My dear Marie writes that the children miss me and wonder when I will be home again. I miss them, but they will understand when they are older that I am making a better world for them. One day, they will be proud of their papa." This document, as we have just discovered, is a personal account from Valen. He writes about how he was welcomed from Berlin once he arrived, and reveals that he has a wife named Marie and 2 children, and how he misses them, and how once they are older, they will understand that what he was doing in Africa, whatever it is, was making a better world for them. And whatever he is doing, we can speculate that it is not anything good for the Allies. Valen is a man who will maintain his family life while being an absolutely ruthless leader with some kind of twisted goal. And this speaks to the reality of a lot of German officers during World War II in real life. It's true that some would maintain their family dynamic while at the same time being able to commit the most heinous and evil acts without their families ever knowing, or, even worse, the families do know, but they somehow believe it to be a necessary act, or even a good act. But not every German officer was like this. Just like the previous letter stated, some officers wouldn't go along with it, or didn't agree with it at all. So they would either remain silent and do as they're told, or they would be removed or executed. Just from this letter alone, there's a chilling atmosphere behind these words from Valen. The next letter that can be found in a bigger tent next to one of the entrance gates, on the other side of the map. It'll be sitting on the right side of the tent on a box, and it reads this. "Our capture of Tobruk has been successful, but nothing could have prepared me for the battle and the enemy's bravery. I watched a ragtag group of South Africans hold a point with bayonets, Indians manning machine gun nests to the last one, and Australians who could have been mistaken for demons. Even when the tanks broke through, the infantry were still fighting. They were eventually overrun, but the memory of their fight will endure." So reading this letter, it's obviously another account from an unknown soldier who was at the Battle of Tobruk, talking about how hard the Allies fought in Tobruk, despite them ultimately losing the city to the Germans. Historically, the Germans would underestimate and look down on their enemy. They would go fight in some places and be shocked at how hard a resistance they got. Stalingrad comes to mind as an example. The soldier mentions different groups from South Africa, Australia, and even India. So while yes, Tobruk fell into German hands, this particular soldier is shaken by witnessing the ferocity of the fighting from these different Allied armies in the city. Also, this letter gives recognition to the armies that are historically overshadowed by the main Allied powers. The next letter that we can observe is off of the body of another officer that you kill as the main objective. A note can be found on him which reads this. "The General Major sent by General Valen is going around waving papers about another idiotic German project." This letter doesn't say much, just that this officer thinks that whatever this new project from Valen is, he believes it to be idiotic. But he also mentions that the General Major, probably General Major Koch, has been going around the outpost waving his papers around, spouting some nonsense about the project, whatever it is, that Valen is working on. The next letter that you can pick up is on the last of the 3 officers, Kill him, and you'll pick up a note that reads this. The threat assessment on the General Major's half-track returned valuable information. The principal dangers are from landmines and from improvised explosives, as well as gunfire directed at combustible weak points. As long as travel is restricted to known safe routes, mines should not pose a problem. Following the assessment, we reinforce the combustible areas with armored grills. These will prevent damage from most gunfire, though a slight risk remains in the unlikely event of sniper fire. This document tells us about a modified half-track that a General Major has been riding around in. This also stands as foreshadowing to the end of the mission. It explains how even with all of these modifications, they felt no need to protect against sniper fire in the long term, because it is considered unlikely that wherever this half-track would be, there would not be a sniper in the area to do away with it through the armored grills. But we proved just how wrong they were to believe in that sort of statement at the end of the mission. The last letter that we can find in this mission is at the very end of the mission on the other side of the lake, in some kind of temple. You can kill an officer and loot him and get this note. Major Alessandro, your presence is required at the Gabaroon Oasis to assess the reassignment of your troops. General Valen appreciates your assistance in this matter. General Major Coke. So as I've just read, this letter is addressed to an Italian major from General Major Coke, telling him that he is asked to come to Gabaroon to oversee reassignment of the troops under his command. This is probably due to Valen not wanting the project to be compromised and might see the Italian soldiers in the area as a liability. And it's entirely possible that he doesn't trust the Italians due to the fact that he is going around executing German soldiers who disagree with what he is doing. So this major was summoned to Gabaroon to possibly move his troops out of the hub so that no rumors can spread among the Italian soldiers about whatever this project is, and this hub might even be used as transport for parts and materials for the project. In Mission 3, we find ourselves in a place called Hellfire Pass, or also known as Hellfire Pass. Spawning on the bridge, we can make our way through the right side trench, taking each right until we get to a climbable point near a rock with a campfire behind it, where we can find our first note of Mission 3. General Valen might very well be a military genius, but his constant demands and requisitioning of supplies and men are hampering my efforts to maintain the security of our recent gains. None dare question or speak out against him. Here we are told that General Valen is moving troops and valuable supplies somewhere else, most likely to the area that this project is being built. This unknown officer in charge of defense in the region is frustrated that he seems to have less and less for his job with keeping the area secure. How big that area is, we aren't really told. This letter also states that Valen is regarded as a military genius and that none dare speak against him. Moving from the campfire and making our way up to the main road, we come across some houses, and behind one of the sandbag barricades, we can find another document. Interestingly, a page from Valen's journal, which reads this. The project progresses well. Let Rommel have his little victories, if it means the Fuhrer grants me free reign. He sees Africa within the Reich's grasp already, and knows that I can deliver that. And when I do, our stranglehold on Britain will be complete, and that little man Churchill will beg for mercy. Valen states that his project is progressing at a steady pace, while also displaying what seems to be a spite of jealousy at Rommel's notoriety. He explains that Hitler has given him free reign, which means he is allowed to do what he has already been doing, like moving supplies or needless executions. Valen also states that what he is doing will bring Britain down, and how specifically Churchill will beg for mercy. Valen displays a mix of contempt, confidence, and even delusion. Contempt for his fellow soldiers and generals, confidence in what he is doing and that it'll work, and delusion because he believes in his project being the sole thing that will knock Britain out of the war. Which, if you're not familiar with how the attitude of some Germans were in World War II, they thought like this a lot. Heading just to the right of this spot, there is a white building with an objective inside, leading to our next note. To all officers, the Overseer of Defenses will inspect our fortifications in the pass over the next few days. His word should be considered law as we seek to consolidate our defensive lines against the approaching Allied forces. Needless to say, he is to be guarded and kept safe in the event of an attack. For information on his schedule, report to the Central Communications Outpost near the well. Addressed to all officers, we learn that the defenses in the pass are to be looked over by an Overseer of Defenses. This Overseer has the authority of defensive points in the area, and what he says is to be considered law, and that he is to be protected should an attack take place. Our next letter can be found in another hut located near one of the artillery pieces that stands as an optional objective, so it's not too difficult to find. The note is a letter from home which is addressed to a German soldier named Ernst. Dear Ernst, the papers are full of news from the African front. We are proud that you are doing your part for the Reich. Old Mrs. Ehrlich, was most vigorous in her praise of Field Marshal Rommel and our fine boys. Your mother glowed with pride. She passes on her regards and asks that you give the British a good thrashing from her. Your loving father. Here we find a family letter from the German perspective. This father, writing to his son, Ernst, expresses how everyone in Germany is proud of the progress made in Africa. The news reports are good, and we see here that Rommel is once again praised for leading the charge of the North African campaign. A little side note here, I actually enjoy the duality displayed by Rommel and Valen in this game. Rommel is the poster boy that delivers victory after victory, while Valen is a bit of a backroom star that has a goal to deliver the victory that will really count, or in his mind, that's what will happen. On the right side of the map, in its own little secluded spot, we can find another campfire that has another letter, which reads this. Dearest Martin, I miss you terribly. The Women's Land Army is grueling work. You'd hardly know me. Hitler may have his U-boats sinking food convoys, but I'm working from dawn till dusk, milking cows and digging ditches, all for victory. Oh, Maisie and I are driving tractors now. Dad says that scares him more than Hitler does. Yours lovingly, Jane. This letter is continuing the story of Martin from the first mission's letter. This is written by a woman named Jane. At first, we can guess that maybe this is written by a girlfriend or a wife, but I suspect, due to how she writes this letter, she might be more of a close sister. She talks about being in the Women's Land Army, which was established in World War I, but then disbanded, but was revived in 1939. Women in this organization were often employed to work on British farms, sometimes alongside prisoners of war. If they grew up on a family farm, they would be employed to work on those same exact farms. This letter from Jane is another example of morale of the British population. Even though tilling farms isn't the same as sinking ships, Jane has an enthusiastic attitude in doing her part for the war effort to defeat Germany. Just ahead of this campfire is a white building with an opening that you can jump to from the cliffside, and at the top is another note on the table. The overseer, General Hoselin, is headed to the northern 8-8 before he moves onwards. Make sure his final stop is up to the standards he has seen so far. Here we get a name to the overseer, and it mentions where he is on the map. This general will be positioned at the northern gun installment at the top of the map, and of course, you're able to kill him. The next letter that can be found will be in a basement in one of the houses next to the tower with a sniper's nest in it. It'll be sitting on a table near some radios, and it will read this. These might be dangerous thoughts, but today I felt respect for the Germans. On the approach to Benghazi, we had a German squad on the run. The only problem was a mad sergeant on their side. He hunkered down with a few men and held us up so the rest could escape. Even when he was the only one left, he didn't surrender. I threw the grenade that got him in the end, but I don't feel like much of a hero. So here we have an account from an Allied soldier recounting his experience with the German installment in the Benghazi region, and how the Allied advance in that region was stalled by a retreating German squad, and how a sergeant with a few men held out so the rest of the German squad can escape. And this soldier expresses that he doesn't feel like a hero in taking the soldiers out with a grenade. When we study war, we often get accounts from soldiers and how they would do their duty, but it brought on guilt among other things. And it's due to studying history, and it's due to things like this that will always make me have respect for soldiers in any armed branch of the military. Not really being from a specific country either, but just in general, I have major respect for anyone that has served in a military in the past or present. Moving on to Mission 4, we are able to find our first letter by the main road sitting on a crate next to a guard tower. That reads, Dear Ernst, I write to tell you that Emil has been wounded on the Eastern Front. Do not fret though. His commanding officer wrote to tell us that your brother is as well as can be expected and in a field hospital far from the front lines. Your loving father. This letter, addressed once again to Ernst, informs him that his brother, Emil, is not only fighting on the Eastern Front, but was wounded and recovering in a field hospital away from the fighting, and as far as his family knows, he'll be fine. Our next letter can be found in a platform above the road, which you can access via ladder. The letter will be sitting next to a fold-out chair and reads, Dear Martin, thank you for the upbeat letter, son. Reading between the lines, I can tell you've been having a tough time of it. Thanks for sparing your mother the details. Stay strong, look out for your mates, and they'll do the same for you. Your proud dad. In this letter from Martin's father, he thanks him for one of his letters being upbeat and positive, though we don't know which letter he is referring to. The dad senses in his son that it's been rough for Martin, as one can expect from being a soldier in wartime. He tells Martin to stay strong and to watch out for his fellow soldiers, and that they'll do the same for him. After retrieving this letter, we can make our way into the fort where our next story letter can be found. Making our entry and going up the left side staircase on some wooden crates, we'll find our next note. Valen is a driven man. He does not tolerate weakness or doubt. Any who question his methods or fail to meet his high standards are disposed of. I feel for the poor wretch caught spying on him. The screams have been terrible. I am certain he wants us to hear them, as an example of what happens to those who cross him. Here, we see another instance of Valen's ruthlessness. We aren't told who spied on him, but it could have been the informant that Carl came to the fort to save. Either way, the spy was tortured to the point where the screams were so loud that everyone in the fort could hear them. The soldier suspects that Valen wants everyone within earshot to know what happens if they cross him. And of course, it's no secret that during World War II, both armies on the Allied and the Axis side would employ more than less favorable interrogation tactics, but the German army just had some colorful characters that just sort of loved specializing in this sort of thing like torture and information extraction. Whereas on the Allied side you might have some of it, but it's significantly toned down than what the Germans employed when they would have to really get some serious information out of somebody. The next note, which we can find in one of the upper rooms of the fort, speaks about the same thing, but it's a page from Valen's journal. There was a traitor on my own staff. It is of little consequence who he works for. I have many enemies. The Führer is surrounded by those in the party who are jealous of my success and would see me fail, but I do not concern myself with their identities. I have men at my disposal more efficient than I at getting to the truth. And even if they don't, it matters not. The traitor will serve as a lesson to those who would cross me. I have more pressing concerns. So here in this page from Valen's journal, he writes that he doesn't even care about the identity of the spy or who he works for, but suspects that it would be somebody from Hitler's inner circle, and says he has a lot of enemies in the Nazi party. One thing I always take note of when learning about World War II and Nazi Germany is all the intense rivalries that sprang up within it. Someone like Valen would probably butt heads a lot with his peers. And he's not wrong when he says that people would be jealous of his success, because when it came to Hitler and his fanatical party, there were plenty of people that wanted to stick as close to him as possible. Valen thinks that because of this project in North Africa, which he predicts will win him the campaign, there will be people back in Germany eager to do away with Valen, possibly trying to get dirt on him, etc. Valen is also using the spy as an example even to his own men, so everyone knows not to cross him. If we leave the room and turn a corner, we can find a ladder which, of course, leads up. We can climb up it, and we'll find our next letter sitting on a chair. Dear Dad, the heat is almost unbearable. For a place so devoid of life, flies and vultures appear almost instantly to swarm over the dead and the wounded. If this isn't a vision of hell, I don't know what is. Dear Dad, hope you're well. I'm fine here, ready and eager to kill more Germans. So right here, the story of Martin is continuing as we are painted a picture of what Martin's war experience is like in Africa. He describes flies and vultures appearing to pick apart the dead and wounded as the sky is blotted out by smoke emanating from the destroyed vehicles, and he equates it to a vision of hell. But he bounces back with wishing his dad well, saying he's ready to kill more Germans. It's possible he's playing up his enthusiasm, so he won't worry his parents. Not being able to speak from my own experience, but mainly from what I've been able to observe from studying stuff like war and movies and documentaries, you often get the situation where the soldiers in the thick of battle writing home back to their parents, not wanting to give them graphic details about what war is like, just hoping that they can make it out to eventually tell that story later. But some people in the militaries have such a bad experience that they never want to relive those details ever again. And that's truly one of the most tragic things I think that can be told in a documentary or a movie is how bad war really gets. I don't think that a lot of us get it when you see things like this letter, even in this video game. I know it's a video game, but I like to sort of compare it to real life, even though it's not that realistic. This could very well be a real story from a real letter from a real person in the past. So I try to treat it with that kind of respect. Side tangent here, I'm sorry. In Mission 5, after you make entry into the town, in one of the buildings on the right side of the map, buried in the sand, we find this. Dear Ernst, it is with a sad heart that I write to you today. Oma Elsa died in an air raid last night. If only she had agreed to live with us. But she was always so stubborn. We heard 20 to 30 bombs fall about a mile or so away and prayed she had gone to shelter. Your loving father. Addressed to Ernst, his father writes to him informing him that someone named Oma was killed in an air raid in the German mainland. This woman named Oma could have been a girlfriend or a love interest for him. No doubt that his father is mentioning Oma to Ernst because she had to have meant something to him. The father also writes that if only Oma had agreed to live with Ernst's family, she wouldn't have been killed. So it's possible Ernst's family might live in the countryside away from the main cities. We can find our next note in front of a secluded house, which reads, as usual, the Allies nip at our heels from the deep desert. But there is a new rumor. One of an Allied sniper. Men say he's like the desert sand. He goes everywhere. Wustgeist is what they call him. The desert ghost. Some fear him more than they fear General Wallen. Myself among them. In this account, this is the first mention of the Germans acknowledging the actions that Karl has been up to in Africa, and they dubbed him the Desert Ghost. This unknown soldier mentions that many Germans, including himself, are more scared of Karl than actually General Wallen, comparing him to sand, because he gets everywhere. Venturing into the back of one of the bigger buildings, we will find the next note sitting on a bed, which reads, Dear Martin, your mother is keeping herself busy. Knitting for victory. She hopes they're feeding you well. She says a growing lad like you wouldn't get a square meal at home these days, what with rationing being the way it is. Your proud dad. P.S. Your mother asks if you've seen the pyramids yet. This letter from Martin's dad speaks about Martin's mother and how she's finding ways to keep busy and hopes that Martin is eating well due to the fact that he wouldn't get as good of a meal back home before the war because of rationing. Around this time in the war, Great Britain had to undergo rationing, especially with the threat of German U-boats sinking Allied supply ships. Food had to be rationed by people in the civilian population, which is reflected not only in this letter, but the letter from Jane. Near one of the anti-air encampments, up in a tower, we'll find our next note. The project is proceeding well. I'm going to Kasserine. I want to be closer to the construction and somewhere quiet in this continent. The pass is like a home away from home, or at least it will be when my outpost is complete. Here we have another excerpt from Wallen revealing that he is going to Kasserine to be closer to the project's construction, and he mentions that it is quiet, like a home away from home if you will, and plans to make his stay more permanent in the future, touting the completion of this supposed outpost of his. We now make our way to one of the rooms on the second floor positioned in one of the walls. Sitting on a crate next to the other supply crates, the note reads, I can't believe how brazen the enemy has become. A group of commandos turned up behind our lines in an attempt on Rommel's life. They must have run nearly 20 kilometers to get to Beta Latoria from the shoreline undetected. One was killed, but the rest are held securely. It's lucky we prevented them from doing too much damage. Though perhaps doubly fortunate that Rommel was in Italy at the time. So it's explained here that an assassination attempt was made on Field Marshal Rommel, and this soldier is in disbelief at how bold the Allies have become in the way that they carry out the war. This supposed assassination group drove 20 kilometers only to be captured by the Germans, and Rommel was not present at the location. Rommel is not like Wallen in the sense that Wallen will hunker down and focus on his work. The same thing would happen in real life in a negative way for the Germans, where in 1944, when Rommel was put in charge of the Atlantic Wall defenses in Europe, was on holiday with his family when the Allied invasion commenced. In another second floor room, we can enter via a staircase, and we will find the next letter on a stretcher, which reads this. No one dares to criticize Wallen openly now. In the mess the other day, Wilhelm loudly cursed the general, despite my protestations. His outburst attracted hostile stares from certain quarters, and now I haven't seen him in over a week. Reassigned, they say. I fear for his life. The general will not tolerate a piece of grit in his well-oiled machine. We are given an example of the intolerance of disagreement with General Wallen's operation. Open opposition is grounds for quote-unquote reassignment, which we can conclude that this soldier isn't going to see Wilhelm ever again. The last letter of this mission is going to be on an officer that is a target that we have to tail until eventually we can kill him and loot the note. The project is progressing as planned. The supplies are already being transported to the Wunderwaffe station. I will follow to oversee production myself. There is no one else I can trust. Everything must run to schedule and at peak efficiency, like a well-oiled machine. This, being another note from Valen's journal, explains that he is going to oversee the production of the project and that there is no one else he can trust with the supervision of the construction. At this point, we know a lot about Valen. He is ruthless, paranoid, and very hands-on when it comes to his work, to where he will not tolerate even minor criticism from any of his peers or subordinates. We now come to Mission 6, Kasserine Pass. The first main letter that we're going for is in the big structure on the right side of the map, and we'll find it on one of the wooden tables. Zoika needs my attention. I will be at the facility to oversee the final stages of construction. Oberst Johann has command in my absence. Report to him in the events of enemy incursions. He will also have the combination to the safe if its contents are required. Now, at this point in the game, Zoika is the code name that Valen's project is named under, and that's pretty much revealed to us in the second mission, so it's pretty well known if you've played the game at this point. Valen instructs someone to report to an officer named Johann, so Valen can go attend to his work on Project Zoika. This letter tells us that Oberst Johann will have the combination to a safe if they are required. And after we leave this building, we'll be able to find Johann somewhere out and about in the map. In a small house, just a small walk away from here, we will be able to find our next note sitting in one of the corners of the house. Hitler does not know what he has unleashed. Valen has his sights set beyond Africa, and even Europe. I have heard him refer to the Fuhrer's methods as inefficient and crude. I think he has dangerous ambitions. This note from an unknown soldier explains that Valen is making plans beyond Africa, and this letter references the fact that Valen expects loyalty from his men, but will not do the same for Hitler. Valen is said to be having dangerous ambitions. So in this case, it's more than likely that Valen is plotting to overthrow or somehow do away with the Fuhrer. So after we leave this house, we will be able to see another house even further down the road and be able to find the note in that house, which will read this. Dear Martin, we were worried to hear that you had been wounded, but thankful that you are alive and well enough to write. Even with your left hand. Sorry about your pal, Solly. God bless you, son, and grant you a speedy recovery. Your proud dad. So we aren't given much here, but we do learn that Martin has been wounded in combat, but is well enough to write back to his parents. And no doubt in the letter he wrote informing his parents about his wounding, mentioned a pal of his that died in a battle named Solly. Oftentimes when we read about or watch war movies, sometimes we get a small inkling of what kind of emotion someone would feel to have survived an attack, only for their friends to die. But Martin's parents can probably rest easy knowing their son still lives. If you manage to track down Oberst Johann and kill him, you can loot the note from Valen. Johann, watch over this place while I'm away. I have a bad feeling that trouble may be approaching. The combination of the headquarters safe has been attached if its contents are needed. Guard it with your life. Alert me if the desert ghost is near. Help will be on its way. Valen has entrusted Johann to watch over this place and gave him the combination to the safe found in the HQ. He also expresses concern that Karl is close by. Valen knows he is right behind him in terms of how close Karl is to discovering his operation. Valen, even through writing, we can see is becoming even more paranoid about his project failing, scrambling and scrounging to try to complete it as fast and efficiently as possible. All the while, Karl is right on his tail, ready to stop him at any given chance. In one of the other houses in this map of houses, we can find another letter addressed for Ernst. My darling Ernst, I miss you too, my angel, and look forward to embracing you again soon. In answer of your questions, number 1, no, I think only of you, sweetheart. 2, more proud than you can possibly imagine. 3, only when we see each other. Write soon. I haven't heard from you in over a fortnight. Yours always, Hilda. So actually when I found this letter for the first time, it actually caught me off guard when I first read it. It's essentially a love letter from a girl named Hilda, who is either a girlfriend or a wife. Unlike Oma, this we can confirm is a wife or a girlfriend of Ernst. From the way she wrote this, she's probably a wife. This letter lays out some answers to questions that Ernst probably asked in a previous letter. I think the first question from Ernst might have been, do you think of anyone else? It's possible that Ernst has been feeling a little bit insecure due to him being away from home for a long time. I don't think it would be too far of an idea that wives back at home in any country would have cheated if given the chance, but I guess that would depend on the kind of people they are and the circumstances that they were in. The second question that was asked might have been, "Are you proud of me?" Of course, being a soldier would have been difficult, and just as a comfort, it's possible Ernst wanted reassurance that he was doing the right thing and wanted Hilda to be proud of him, which, as far as this letter explains, she is. And I don't really know what the third question would have been, but for Ernst, probably would have been something special. Another note that can be found in a white building with a tower laying on a chest, the note reads this: "I stood over a dying enemy today. He coughed and sputtered over the gaping wound in his belly. He was hit by stray fire while trying to rescue their wounded. I watched him save 2 men before falling, trying to recover a third. I will admit that he reminded me of Emil. I hope he is well. Tonight, I shall drink for his safety and let the thoughts of Hilda guide me to sleep." So right away, from the information that we pieced together from the previous letters, this note was obviously written by Ernst, saying that a dying enemy reminded him of his brother Emil, and how he would drink for his safety while thinking of Hilda until he fell asleep. I know I've said it probably at least a couple times in this video, and it's a little off topic, but, you know, I do get a little sympathy when any soldier from any army has to be put in these kind of situations where they have to kill and accept the fact that other people that they care about might die as well. It probably tears Ernst up inside knowing that his brother Emil is on another continent, basically, fighting a different army than he is, and knowing that Emil was injured if not killed, and the stress probably from thinking about if the possibility of Emil dying probably really stressed Ernst out, and that paired with wanting to make his parents proud, wanting to make Hilda proud, the news of probably a friend dying, Oma Elsa, that really messes with a person built on top of each other. So it's things like these where even the fact that this soldier is a German soldier, I can still sympathize if this was a real person. Up the tower in the same building, we can find a note sitting on a crate. It appears Rommel has had his uses. He has contained the Allied threat and, as a result, allowing production to continue smoothly. Let him play his little chess games in the Western Desert. One day soon, I will sweep him and the Allies from the board in one fell swoop. So at this point, Valen disregards Rommel and plans to do away with him in some way. Valen seems absorbed in himself that he has as much interest in getting rid of his fellow countrymen as he does getting rid of the Allies in North Africa. And it's people like these where you really have to question whether you even want them on your side. So you do get characters in history like this, and in movies and games like this one, you do get characters that are so comically evil that you can't believe that they would be a real person. But then again, we have an entire history to base this fictional character on, and it is not impossible at all that someone like this could have and probably did exist at one point or another. I'm sure cases would be made in Valen's defense that, oh, he's good at his job. Oh, he's really efficient at doing what he was assigned to do. Oh, he's loyal. At least on the surface he's loyal, but secretly scheming to, you know, take power at some point. But you really have to question if you really want a guy like this on your side. And if I had to take a vote, if I was involved in some way, I would probably say no, but it would depend on how obvious a character like Valen would be. And it's not like the war made him this evil. The First World War, which used chemical weapons, Valen was all for that. We're told that at the beginning of the game, like the second mission, right after the first mission, the Fall of Tobruk, and we're told info on Valen. Carl mentions that he was all for chemical weapons, so this is a relatively bad individual that you know, you never really want to affiliate with people like this. Another side tangent. I'm sorry. Next letter, please. And that brings us right into Mission 7, Point du Fa Airfield. My god, I probably butchered that. We can find a letter sitting on a rock on the right side of the map, past the Sniper's Nest Tower. The airfield is operating at a maximum capacity. With the Fall of Tobruk, Valen has to filter all supplies through here. although he is becoming desperate. His much vaunted efficiency is slipping from his grasp, and no amount of threats on his part can increase the productivity of this airfield. Not that it stops him trying. The letter informs us that after the Germans lost Tobruk, this airfield was relied on to get Axis supplies into Africa. Even with the retaking of Tobruk, it probably is more beneficial to have the supplies come through the airstrip rather than risk them being sunk by the Royal Navy near Port Tobruk. Our next note can be found in the radio tower at the end of the airstrip. Climbing the tower stairs, we'll find the note sitting on the desk. The men are drinking to Second Lieutenant Phillips. I can't bring myself to do it. The whole scene keeps playing in my mind. All the other anti-tank guns were destroyed, so we were forced to retreat. Phillips stayed behind while we ran, waiting for the panzers to come into view before firing the last gun. He got one. I could have sworn he was smiling when the Germans hit the ammunition stock and killed him. So here, we are given an account from an Allied soldier. He's recounting a fellow soldier being killed in action. A soldier named Phillips sacrificed himself to cover a retreat from a defensive position. This letter mentions how they were down to only one anti-tank gun and how Phillips managed to kill one before a shot hit the ammo stockpile close by, killing Phillips. But what really stuck out in this soldier's mind is how Phillips smiled right before he was killed. When viewing media dealing with war, we get stories of sacrifice and things like this that stick in my mind. And you know, it's a funny thing how war binds people. Again, not speaking from experience. I've never served in an army, but you can just tell when they tell stories and how it's portrayed in movies and real life accounts from past soldiers. You know, they were just ordinary guys doing their job. It just happened to be a really bad job that nobody would ever want in their life, probably. If you were in the right mind, I guess. By my opinion, I guess you wouldn't want it. Something about this letter tells me that this was probably a group or a squad of American soldiers. Just given the name Phillips, it sounds sort of what an American soldier would be named. If this was like Call of Duty World at War or something, it'd be the name you'd see when you hover over a sidekick guy or a fellow soldier. But getting back on track, you do get accounts where, you know, the one guy that dies, everybody remembers him, everybody liked him, or maybe they didn't, but, you know, then it's a question of, oh, well, why did he have to die? Well, sometimes that's just how it is, and I don't know, I wouldn't know if you could ever really truly recover from something like that. And in these soldiers' minds, they're pouring one out for their buddy, and this soldier writing the letter, I don't think is going to be forgetting this instance for a good long while, at least. In the last aircraft hangar at the end of the strip on the left side, we can find a desk near an ammo crate where we will find our next letter. Dear Martin, good news at last. You've got Rommel on the run again. Good. Your old war wound hasn't stopped you from being in the thick of it. We're very proud of you, son. Glad to see our boys giving the Germans a taste of their own medicine. Surely this war can't last that much longer. Your proud dad. So essentially what this tells us is that the Allies are having some traction against Rommel in Africa. Martin's dad is hopeful that this will mean a quicker end to the war for the Allies. But of course we know that there's another 3 years before the war with Germany is officially over. But, you know, at the time, hearing news little by little, you can never truly tell with something like that, I guess. For our next note, we are required to open the bunker doors and venture down through the various staircases and tunnels. Making our way down there, we can see an intersection of hallways that has the note sitting on the left desk. The Allies threaten to ruin everything. We must work fast to ensure that the tank is complete. All available effort must be made. I have redirected material and men at all costs. Nothing must impede production. Once the first tanks are finished, we can crush the Allied advance, re-establish supply lines, and maximize production. So, I think it's fair to say that Volin has gone off the deep end here. Volin is now solely dependent on his rat tanks being able to fix the issue the Allies have been inflicting on them. Side note here, the rat tank was a real-life tank that was planned to be built in 1942, but there would have been so many issues with a tank like this being built. You know, you got the size of it. It's essentially an aircraft carrier on land. Not really, I'm exaggerating, but this sucker was big. It wouldn't have been able to cross any bridge in Germany, so, you know, traversing land just in general would have been very difficult for this thing. You know, you had the materials to build these. That might have been a problem for Germany, given the fact that at this point of the war, they weren't even established for a war. because they had never planned to have had a war of this scale. So having big Wunderwaffen tanks like this just wouldn't have worked, because the Allies would have bombed it into oblivion. So that wouldn't have worked either. And Valen, armed with this kind of tank, in his mind, thinks that once the first few are created, he will be able to just magically fix everything. Remind you of anyone else? In a supply storage area, we can find a small crate at the end of it with our next note on it. The British had us cornered with heavy machine gun fire earlier. Oberlieutenant Sommer located machine gun posts on the front and right flank and then ordered us to attack the right flank while keeping 8 men with him. We were crawling in the dirt to get our target when we saw the Oberlieutenant lead his group in a charge across 400 meters of open ground to the front posts. He took 3 posts and captured 50 prisoners, all of them as surprised by his bravery as the rest of us. So here we have an unknown soldier telling a story of an officer leading a squad of 8 men across 400 meters towards some machine gun posts that had them pinned down, taking down 3 of them and capturing 50 prisoners. This officer managed to stun the Allied defenders with his bravery and the German soldiers under his command. The last note in Mission 7 will be nearby one of the staircases on a crate. Dear Colonel Klein, once more I write for any information about my son, Ernst Hauptmann, reported missing in December of 1942. It may be that he was injured and ended up in a field hospital where he is unable to write, or perhaps has been taken prisoner. We would be grateful for any news you can give that might ease our anguish. His elder brother Emil died of wounds on the Eastern Front, and we seek any solace we can get. Sincerely, Albert Hauptmann. This letter is written by Ernst's father to an officer named Colonel Klein concerning his son's disappearance. And this isn't the first time that Albert is writing to find out what happened to his son, also revealing that Emil, his other son, was killed on the Eastern Front. Ernst was officially reported missing in December of 1942, and we either have a situation where Colonel Klein is ignoring the letters, or he genuinely doesn't know where Ernst was last. I believe that Klein may know what happened to Ernst, but won't return any letters to Albert. We don't know if Albert has any other children, but losing 2 children in a war must be torturous for any parent. So, this will be the final mission for our leather gathering video. Rat Factory, Mission 10, here we go. We'll find a letter on a pallet of sheet metal on the left side of the map. We have done everything the General has asked of us and more. We are working around the clock to complete production of the rat, but his demands are becoming unreasonable. I watched Valen deal with a worker who'd taken too long with a track link. He just hurled the man into the void. The scream carried on for an age before it ceased. This worker in the factory writes about how, despite all the efforts to meet Valen's expectations, it is still not enough. This worker recounts how Valen killed a man by hurling him off a cliff for not being fast enough. It seems that Valen is not afraid to get his hands dirty, and he seems to fly off the handle at random. He's a perfectionist, ambitious, and ruthless. And he's also the kind of man that's not good to have in a leadership role. We don't know how he achieved his rank of general, only that he was around for the First World War and was in favor of chemical weapons. So we can imagine how he managed to attain the rank of general. Crossing the bridges to the right side of the map, we can find a hidden desk that has our next note on it. Hitler's facilitating will cost me Africa, if not the war. The rats would be rolling off the production line and into Egypt, if not for his indecision and others in Berlin whispering against me. Valen is essentially now full mask off. What we essentially have here is Valen is Hitler if he had an extended military career. Hold on, let's think about it for a second. Valen blames others for his actions that are probably his fault. He might be referring to the process that it took to even get the rat development to be started. He probably had to go through a lot of red tape and meetings and committees. Valen is not fanatically loyal as other Germans might be to the Fuhrer. He seems to just play nice while scheming in secret. And I mention red tape and meetings because due to a fascist state like Nazi Germany having so much iron grip and control, probably to even get this production started of this rat tank, he had to probably attend a lot of meetings and suck up to a lot of people to even get this started. So, you know what? I can commend him and not even disagree with him, probably feeling a little resentful, but you know, he just doesn't have the he just doesn't have what it takes. I'm gonna be honest with you. Continuing this whole charade that he has, back across to the left side of the map, we can find our next letter in a workshop kind of area on one of the tables. I will not give up now. Not when I'm so close. Once I have crushed resistance in Africa, I shall turn my attention, and my rats, north to Europe. Hitler is not fit to wear the mantle of Führer. The Reich is a vast war machine, and he does not know how to use it. I do, and I will. Yeah, so essentially what I've been saying is now confirmed. Valen is plotting to overthrow Hitler. So it's entirely possible that if he was allowed to, Valen would have started a civil war in Germany. Although I don't know how far he would get with the SS and Gestapo being a thing, breathing down everyone's neck. Someone should probably tell him to stop leaving random pages of his journal everywhere. Putting that aside, this is another comparison to Hitler we can make due to Valen putting too much trust in his wonder weapons like Hitler would. Due to this apparently being his brainchild, at least in this game it was, I'm not sure how he plans to use the rats in Europe. He would have to get them across the Mediterranean past the Royal Navy and have to transport them to the German mainland. Due to how big this tank is and how resource intensive it is, I don't think it would be possible or successful. Once we meet Valen face to face and go down the elevator, we're met with the rat, where, on top of it, we can find our next note. I can still see the eyes of that infernal German, like a glimpse into the soul of a man possessed. I was in one of 2 machine gun nests laying covering fire when we heard the screams from the other squad. He must have sneaked around to clear us out, and then he was behind us, gunned down nearly everyone. I don't know who killed him, but it wasn't me. I wish I had the courage to do what he did. Here we have an account from an Allied soldier who tells us that he was in a machine gun nest next to another one. He talks about how a lone German managed to clear almost all of them out before he was killed. From what this letter suggests, I don't think he's talking about Oberlieutenant Sommer from one of the previous letters. This appears to be a separate case of Allied machine gun nests being attacked by the Germans, and therefore, there isn't much to go on here. Our next note can be found on the ground floor near one of the ammo boxes sitting on a desk. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Hauptmann, I regret to inform you that your son was killed in action. Enclosed is a letter he wished to be forwarded in the event of his death. Colonel Heinrich Klein. Dear Mother and Father, if you are reading this, I am truly sorry. I only ever wanted to make you proud, so I'm sorry for causing you pain now. Your son, Ernst. So here we have confirmation about what happened to Ernst. Like his brother Emil, he was killed in action. And the Hauptmanns have lost another son. Ernst had a habit of wanting to make the people in his life proud, at least that's what the letters tell us. His parents, Hilda, and whoever else he could. And that essentially will be the end of the video. Thank you everybody so much for watching this video. I was happy to go through and make this video. It took me a while, I'm going to be honest. It took me a while and a lot of stress, but I finally managed to make something that I thought was worth putting out. And, you know, I enjoyed making it, and I'd like to make more stuff like this. If you guys would enjoy it, let me know down in the comments. I just hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope it was a nice video to sit down and have playing in the background if you felt so inclined to play it at all. And, you know, let me know what you thought down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. I'll talk to you in the next one, guys. Bye.